We're back for Your Ears Only. I'm David Alpern.
I'm Melissa Axelverth with this quote from the news. The end of employer-sponsored insurance. That was the prediction of Zeke Emanuel, a key designer of Obamacare, on the direction that government-mandated private insurance is leading the country. It comes with his new book titled Reinventing American Healthcare, How the Affordable Care Act Will Improve Our Terribly Complex, Blatantly Unjust, Outrageously Expensive, Grossly Inefficient, Error-Prone System. Now this.
Down, down, white deportation! Up, up, with liberation! Down, down, white deportation! Up, up, with liberation!
What the president has asked Secretary Johnson to do is conduct a review of practices to ensure that within the confines of the law, we are carrying out these policies in the most humane way possible, because he is very cognizant of the pain that families who are separated have been feeling as a result of deportations. But there is no fix here that does not include legislation.
Under escalating pressure from immigrant rights advocates, President Obama last week pledged to review policies that have driven deportation of the undocumented towards 2 million at a record pace since he took office. It was the first suggestion in over a year that Obama might act alone on immigration while legislative reform languishes in the House of Representatives. Indeed, the House Republican majority recently passed legislation allowing a lawsuit against the president over deferred deportation of young dreamers brought here illegally as children that Obama had previously ordered.
Beyond that 2-year delay, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney continued to insist the president cannot legally order a more general deportation slowdown, which Obama has called tantamount to refusing to enforce the law, and for which view Hispanic activists have dubbed him deporter-in-chief. But many legal experts dismiss that not-in-my-power position, according to an article in the latest issue of the New Republic magazine. And for Your Ears Only, the author of that article joins us now. She's staff writer Nora Caplan-Bricker. Welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
What was the rationale and legal basis for the Obama-backed delay in Dreamer deportations, and who exactly is covered?
So the rationale is that the president has something called prosecutorial discretion. This is based in our government's fundamental separation of powers. Essentially, Congress makes the laws, and the president can decide how those laws are enforced, in particular enforced against individuals. So deferred action for dreamers or for childhood arrivals that are known as dreamers essentially just formalizes a priority that the president had already put in place through this prosecutorial discretion, saying, people who have known no other home other than this country, have lived here their whole lives, gone to school here, they're very low priority for deportation. They're pretty much the bottom of the list. We should be deporting criminals, people who just arrived at the border, long before we would deport dreamers. And so he formalized that very rational priority with deferred action for childhood arrivals, better known as DACA, in 2012. And this deferred action covers essentially people who came to the U.S. before they were 16. There are a few other limits in there. They had to be under the age of 31 when DACA was enacted. They have to have lived in the U.S. continuously since 2007. Can't have committed a crime. They must be in school or working. But that it essentially covers these people who have lived in the U.S. since they were children and came here with their parents, did not come here of their own accord.
On what legal grounds does the White House argue it cannot further expand the definition of the undocumented whose deportations can be delayed, and what do the legal experts say about that White House reasoning?
So the interesting thing here is that the White House hasn't exactly made the argument in specific legal terms. What they've done is more a sort of more political talking point. Many of the activist groups campaigning for immigrant rights have said, stop deportations. The slogan, the common slogan is not one more deportation. And what the White House has said is that we can't do that. That's illegal. We have to enforce the law. The law says, we have to deport people who are here illegally. So, a heckler in San Francisco in November yelled at the president to stop deportations, and he said, actually, I can't do that. And to some extent, that argument is true. They can't just stop enforcing the law. They can't just stop deporting people altogether. But what the legal experts point out is that framing the argument that way, in some ways, is disingenuous. It really skates over this very broad legal ground between stopping deportations altogether and DACA, which is sort of all we have in place. There's a lot of range in there where the White House does have a great deal of discretion.
And what might those categories be?
Parents of dreamers, people who have family members in the United States, veterans who have served in the military here, people whose work is contributing to the economy here. Even some of those categories are pretty narrow and don't get at what I think the advocacy community would like to see, which is, more or less anybody who the administration doesn't have a strong argument for deporting, like criminals, crime lords, drug lords, would be allowed to stay.
The experts say Obama would run into political barriers before legal ones if he broadened the delay in deportations, beginning with congressional power of the purse. Explain that.
So Congress does appropriate a certain amount of money every year for deportations, and that's sort of the most concrete limit on what Obama can do here legally is that he does have to spend that money for the purposes that it's been appropriated for. But a number of experts have pointed out that some of these kind of high priority deportations are very expensive. It's very expensive to track down a drug lord or somebody with a huge network. But that's also a great use of those funds. That's the kind of person who the Department of Homeland Security should be prioritizing deporting. On the other hand, it's less expensive to just sort of do a workplace raid and deport hundreds of people who, yes, they're here illegally, but they're employed, they're working in this factory. So it could certainly slow the rate of deportations and slow the deportation of low-priority people by kind of pushing more of that appropriated money toward these high-priority deportations.
Nora Caplan-Bricker is a staff writer at the New Republic magazine.
Quote from the news, a plausible pathway to explain why some people are more vulnerable. That was Lee Tsai of MIT's Institute for Learning and Memory on a series of Harvard studies suggesting that Alzheimer's is related to a failure in the brain's stress response system and levels of a protein called REST that could protect people against the disease.
Next, on the wheels of a dream, bicycle wheels for your ears only.